Welcome to Ray-ality TV. I'm Raymond McKay. The road to the 2024 election is ahead of us. There will be a presidential election. All 435 House of Representatives are up for another term, and so are a number of Senate seats. One of those seats up for the election will be right here in Rhode Island. Senator Sheldon Whitehouse is going to seek a fourth term, but not without a Republican challenger. One Republican has already filed to run against Whitehouse, and that is Raymond McKay. Ray, how are you today?
I'm doing marvelous. Thank you for having me today.
It's great to have you on. My first question, it's a bit general. Why do you want to be Rhode Island's next U.S. Senator?
Well, the reason is that the citizens of the state of Rhode Island, and indeed the nation, deserve life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. And we don't have that right now. And very simplistic that sounds, but life being protect us physically. And the physical protections is supporting the police department, securing our borders, those type of issues where we can feel comfortable with our family, protecting our children in school. That's not happening right now. Liberty. Liberty is a huge thing, gives us the nation that we live in. And protecting our Constitution is the biggest thing. Enforcing the laws, realizing that the Constitution is not a book that can be thrown away. It is indeed the lifeblood of our American nation, and it has what has made us great over the years. And then again, happiness. What's happiness? We need to grow the economy. Growing the economy slows down the inflation rate, allows people to have more money to spend. So these are very important things in a very simplistic issue. There are so many things that go on in the United States Senate, but these are the basic ones that take care of everybody.
You were going to run for Senate in 2014 against, I believe, Senator Jack Reed at the time, but there was a city ordinance in the city of Warwick where you were working at the time that prevented you from both keeping your job and running for the seat. Is anything of that sort going to be an issue this time around?
No, this time around, I am a retired individual and I will be moving forward. I work for myself now.
Looking to policy, on your website's policy section called The Right Direction, one of the issues you mentioned and you touched upon in your first answer for the first question was the country's southern border. What specific policies would you support to make sure the border is secure?
So we need to enforce our laws, our immigration laws, securing the border, building a wall, building something down there that stops the migration that we have. We can't put an army at the border. It's just unfeasible to do that. So putting up a wall where there's a door for entrance makes a lot of sense.
Typically, you'll hear from critics when it comes to this topic of securing the border. They'll say that the people who are coming here are seeking asylum legally, they contribute to the economy, and they'll even cite things like our current labor shortage at the moment. How would you respond to those counterpoints?
Right now, anybody can go to an asylum in any nation and any of our embassies in any nation. So if you're afraid of your embassy in Ecuador or Colombia, you go to the neighboring country where you're not afraid of that country and go to our embassy there and then apply for it there. Coming across the border illegally because you're seeking asylum is wrong. There are lots of legal ways to do it. We have a lot of the people being harvested over, and when I say harvested, collected by coyotes and brought over, charging these poor people lots of money. Do we have labor needs in the United States of America? We do have labor needs in the United States of America. Are we a country built on immigration? My goodness, yes, we are. And we should continue. There's no reason for us to close our borders. But there is a reason to keep our borders secure and make sure the immigration is legal.
It's likely going to take a compromise and down the middle set of solutions to have any comprehensive immigration reform because just of all the partisan gridlock in DC going on at the moment. Are there any compromises you could see yourself supporting when it comes to this issue?
Back in the 1980s, both gentlemen have now left us, unfortunately. Tip O'Neill from Massachusetts and Ronald Reagan, president at the time, and they came across and they struck a deal back then, a bipartisan deal, which allowed 3 million illegal aliens to become citizens, and they were going to close the border. That was the 1980s. That was a compromise deal, and both parties have failed. So that's a deal that's out there that needs to be enforced. So there's no new legislation or anything that needs to be done. We need to go back to see what's already in print and make it happen.
Let's shift gears to the economy. Everyone's talking about lowering inflation, addressing the national debt that's over $30 trillion. These two coincide, in my opinion, because when you have no money and then you print more money, the money overall becomes less valuable, thus creating what we have called inflation. In your policy section, you do mention balancing the budget. Are there any specific ideas that you would bring to DC if elected?
Many years ago, Rand Paul and several others had come up with a solution to work to pay down the debt. And at that point in 2010, when they first proposed it, it was going to take about 37 years to do it. Right now, we're about 57 years out before we could possibly get to where we need to be. Unfortunately, I will be dead and buried before everything is said and done right. The proposals, we would have to cut back on our spending, grow our economy, and not grow our spending. That's the biggest thing. So if you want to grow the economy, great. You get new tax revenue, great. Don't spend it. Pay off the debt that you have, like you do with your family budget. If you get more money in, you don't spend it right away. You make sure your mortgage is paid off, make sure your car is paid off, make sure your credit cards are paid off. And right now, the United States is just running its credit card like a drunken sailor. And that needs to be taken care of. So if we grow the economy, we increase our tax revenue, take that money and pay down our debt. And don't increase the burden to our great-grandchildren. Because it's not a burden for us. It's not a burden for yourself, Raymond. It is a burden that we're passing on to future generations, 4 or 5 generations from now. And the people of the United States should be cognizant of that fact.
While we're still talking about the debt, and speaking of Rand Paul, you did run former state rep Lancey's campaign for CD2, correct?
That is correct.
So when I had him on, he had talked about the national debt with me. He mentioned a plan that Rand Paul had called the penny plan, where you take 1 penny out of every federal dollar spent, put it in a separate account. I believe it was 5 years. You have a balanced budget, 10 years, $1 trillion surplus. Because all the COVID spending is now 3 pennies. Do you see yourself supporting a plan like that?
Yes, if it's viable and it works, that most definitely.
And before we move on from the economy and spending, that overall topic, recently there's been a lot of talks from the left where they say the Republicans want to cut entitlement programs such as Social Security and Medicare. I don't think all Republicans want to cut that, because there have been some very vocal about it, like Speaker McCarthy saying that they don't want to cut it. But then there are some, however, like Senator Rick Scott of Florida, former Vice President Mike Pence, that are saying you have to at least look at it. Where do you stand on that overall discussion?
So as of today, we don't cut. Going forward, we do take a look at it. So understand, everybody who's got benefits and entitled today, they don't need to worry about it. They don't need to worry about voting against Republicans, because we're not going to take anything away. Nothing gets cut. It is going forward how you manage things going forward. If there's an issue, how do you take care of that issue? And that is a conversation to be had. Are we going to balance it on today's senior citizens? My goodness, no, never. Or those who are receiving the benefits today, no. We will take a look and make sure that it's not too gracious, that we're not giving away money. And for some people who are living paycheck to paycheck, obviously they know we're not giving away money. But there are other people who may be milking the system, beating the system. We need to put a better checks and balances. We just heard last week, during the pandemic, we ended up sending out $200 billion in Social Security unemployment benefits to wrong people. $200 billion, that went to the national debt, because we didn't have $200 billion in the bank. So the checks and balances on those type of things. We're very good at giving out money, but there are obviously our checks and balances on giving out the money is not very good. So we've got to take a look at that.
If that time, since you're saying later on, when that time comes to take a look at those programs like Social Security and Medicare, what kind of route should be taken then, if that has to be sunset?
So it'll be going forward. Obviously, we're going to take a look at the next generation that's going to come up for the benefits there. Do we take a look at their ages? Do we take a look at investments of Social Security? My biggest plan for Social Security is to propose a law that will prevent people from raiding the Social Security Trust Fund. We need to reinvest in the trust fund, and we need to keep politicians' greedy hands out of it. And there's the biggest problem with Social Security right now is there's an awful lot of treasury notes, IOUs in there, and there's no capital.
I have a couple lightning round questions I just want to bring up before we move on to a few more topics.
Sure.
These shorter form, one sentence at the most. Would you support or oppose a federal ban on assault-style weapons like the AR-15?
Any weapon is an assault weapon, so no, I would not support a ban on it.
Are you for or against banning members of Congress from trading stocks?
I am, at this point, I would go against members of Congress trading stocks because they are provided with information that the rest of the nation is not.
So you'd be for a ban on that?
Yes, I would be.
For statehood for DC and Puerto Rico, for or against?
Against.
And if elected alongside a GOP-led Senate, who would you support for Senate Majority Leader?
We'll have to see who's in office at the time in 2025. It wouldn't be a current Senate Majority Leader. It would probably be our Senate Minority Leader, if you would. I'm sorry. A gentleman like Tim Scott would be a marvelous selection, or somebody else. It depends on who's in office at the time.
So it sounds like not for McConnell?
No.
Okay. You're moving on to more solid topics now. You are for term limits. Recently signing the term limits pledge, the organization U.S. Term Limits, they have candidates that sign a pledge. Can you explain a little bit what that pledge means?
So basically, what that pledge means is what our founding fathers found this nation on. You go to your government to serve the people, not yourself. You go there for a short term. It's not a career. Politicians, it was never deemed a career path in anybody's life. These gentlemen back in when the country was founded were farmers. They were businessmen, but had business to go back to, and they had to go back to that. They came, they served the people, and they went back. And that's what it should be going forward. We've already put, both in the state of Rhode Island and at national level, all the executive branches are term limited. So I find it very interesting that the top leader of the nation and the top leaders in the state of Rhode Island have term limits, but all the people who want to stay on for years and years and years, somehow they didn't get caught up in that term limit. So what's good for the goose isn't good for the gander? No, it has to be. So we need to take care of that. There need to be term limits across the board. It becomes self-fulfilling that you become a wealthy individual living in Washington, serving the people. How do you go down there as an average citizen and leave Washington as a millionaire?
Is there a certain number of terms you would favor? I know when Senator Ted Cruz introduces it, it's usually 3 in the House and 2 in the Senate.
I would go along with that. I would actually maybe even 4 in the House, 8 years in the House, 12 years in the Senate. So 4 and 2 is fine.
Sometimes whenever I bring up term limits and the person's opposed to it, they'll say one of two things that, quote, it would empower lobbyists, or they'll say we already have them, saying that they're called elections, which is just not true. Those are what we call term length. How do you feel when you hear those responses from critics?
So I used to be one of those critics. I said the elections are the term limits. When people get tired or think you're doing a bad job, they will vote you out of office. In today's day and age, people are too busy running around, raising their families, earning a living, making ends meet, and to pay attention to the details of what's going on in Washington, unfortunately, too many times. So a term limits is a balance that helps the voter. They vote for them based on what they want. Term limits, you get to vote for them 4 years. And again, going back to our founding fathers, you're serving the people, you're not serving yourself. So you're going to go down to Washington or even the state legislatures for a short time, help them out, do the right thing by the people, and then leave. And as far as making lobbyists, it's strengthening their position because now all of a sudden they're there and they're going to go to a congressman who's getting ready to leave because he's term limited and says, hey, you need to pass this for me because you're on your way out and nobody's going to care. We don't know that that would happen. It's possible that it would happen. And we address that going forward with laws that puts the checks and balances on those folks. If we're going to put a checks and balance on the people representing the citizens of the United States of America, we need to put a checks and balance on the special interest lobbyists as well.
Your opponent, Senator Whitehouse, is very critical about the current composition of the Supreme Court, constantly saying that the right wing has used millions of dollars in dark money to take it. Where do you stand on that argument? Do you agree, disagree?
Obviously, I disagree. The Supreme Court has seen various changes over the years. Right now, it's at a 9-member panel, and that serves us well. Dark money, the senator needs to be very careful. In his past, since he's been in office, there's been dark money flowing his way as well. It is out there. It's something that needs to be controlled. But did dark money launch the Supreme Court into where it is today? I don't believe so.
Multiple Democrats.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry, there was a delay. I thought you were finished. Go ahead.
So it was a delay. It was a thought process delay. In regards to did dark money, basically the analogy is dark money bought a Supreme Court seat. No, it did not.
So multiple Democrats have even gone on record when it comes to the topic of the Supreme Court, or even introduced legislation in one of our congressperson's cases to either add Supreme Court justices, more of them. I think the number's 15 they're proposing. Some have even suggested maybe doing term limits to the justices. How do you feel about those ideas?
So the adding to the bench, going from 9 to 15 in 12 years, when the shoe changes, do we go up to 21 justices on the bench because now the other side's in charge? So just because you don't like the bench at the time, you don't try and change the composure of the bench. So I have huge issues with that. 9 serves us well, and it should stay there. Packing the bench, retweaking it because of your political agenda is horrendous. And people could say, well, the Supreme Court is packed based because of Republicans. The timing and everything else was just bad. The history of the Supreme Court, many of the justices, liberal judges, were approved 98-2 or 98-0. Typically, these are folks who are justices. They know the law, they know the Constitution. Just as long as they stay away from being activist judges and dictating law rather than recognizing what the law is, that's what we need to be careful of. And as far as term limits, I don't see any reason for term limits. Most of our justices do not die in the seat. It is a life appointment, but many resign once they get on in age, and then we replenish the bench. So I don't see any term limits needed. You've brought in somebody who's an intellect, who understands the law, who understands the Constitution. At least you hope you do. You've done your homework on them. There is no reason to replace them for term limits because nobody's lobbying them. They come in, they see the law. The Congress writes the laws. If Congress doesn't like what's going on, change the laws. They are a branch of office. Go ahead.
I did it again. I'm sorry. My final question, it's more on the non-political side. There's like a 4-second delay on my end. I think it's an internet issue with me today. My final question's on the non-political end, and I like to ask everyone this toward the end of things to keep the tradition going. In your opinion, what do you think Rhode Island is best known for?
Oh, goodness. That'll be our beachfronts, our mansions, and our small little towns that we have. The eateries that they have in these small little communities, whether it be Connecticut and Warwick or Harrisville up north, or just the small little town sets that we have that throw back to the beginning of America.
Ray, I want to thank you so much for giving me your time for this. I really appreciate you coming on the show.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. And thank you for watching this episode of Ray-ality TV. If you want to see future episodes as soon as they're posted on this channel, please click the subscribe button down below and the post notification bell icon to the right of it. I'm Raymond McKay. I'll see you next time.